What's up, guys? Welcome to Unit 11, Lesson 2. Quick note, class is going to look a little bit different just because Edpuzzle is not working anymore. And basically, the Biden administration came out and said they will not be offering any waivers to states for their testing requirements. So, unfortunately, that means the STAR test will go on as planned, which means that I need to make sure that everyone is ready so that you all can graduate on time without having to retake this test. So I have to change my strategy. That was a mouthful, basically to say the class is going to look a little bit different. So now you're actually going to have a worksheet with notes, and you're going to have the video in one tab, or like on half the screen and half the screen on the notes, and then do it like that. I hope that it wasn't confusing. Okay. So Unit 11, Lesson 2, Punnett Squares. Make sure you have your notes out because we are starting right at the top. Okay, wait. Okay. Boom. So our lesson objective is that students should be able to describe the laws and conclusions of Mendelian genetics. Students should also be able to predict outcomes of monohybrid crosses by using Punnett Squares. So there's a bunch of words in here that we do not know yet, but we will learn them today. First things first, we have a quick warm-up question. So why do you look like your parents? Why do most people look like their parents? And what role do genetics play in creating us? So for this problem right here, you want to talk about DNA, you want to talk about proteins or something like that. Okay, and just to show you where we are right here at the top, and we're going to keep filling in notes as we go. So, why do we look and act like our parents? Well, first things first, you have to remember what a chromosome is. So a chromosome is going to be like that, inside of the nucleus. Along the chromosome, there are these different segments. Those segments are called genes. And we know that genes code for our traits. So maybe this part of the chromosome, at this gene locus, is going to code for hair color, while that part of the gene, or while that part of the chromosome is going to code for blood type, while this gene, a gene is just a section of a chromosome, is going to code for eye color, and that part may code for growth. So we look and act like our parents because we inherit half of our chromosomes from mom and half of our chromosomes from dad. Also, the chromosomes are slightly modified through crossing over, remember crossing over from meiosis, and independent assortment during meiosis, which creates the sperm and egg that fuse to create us. DNA, as we all know, codes for proteins, which give us our unique traits. As long as you said something like that, you will get that problem correct. So there's this video here. I'm not going to play it right now, but just know that this will be here for you whenever you're ready to study. It's a really good animation. I said I'm not going to play it. Heredity. Not the movie, but pretty darn close. So why should we care about this? Well, if anything, besides maybe the viral unit, this is probably going to be the most relevant and the most applicable to your daily life. So many times I see on like TikTok or I see on YouTube or something, and people are like, how did these two parents make this baby? How did this and this, da da da? Like someone has been cheating. Like, no, that's because those people, bless their hearts, don't understand genetics. But luckily for you, you have the genetics guru here. And I'm going to teach you genetics so that you can go and be smarter than those people on TikTok and YouTube. Okay? You should care about this because heredity is the passing of characteristics and traits from parents to offspring. Heredity explains how and why you got your characteristics. It explains why you and your family may act alike. You and your family may look alike. Look at them. I love Beyonce. Why you guys may behave very similarly. The Addams family, okay? Heredity partially explains, it doesn't fully explain, but it partially explains all of those things in a very scientific and thought out way. So it all started with this dude. His name's Gregor Mendel. He was a European monk born in 1882. He is known as the father of modern genetics, so you may have heard of his name. He was interested in understanding exactly how genes get passed from parents to their babies. In order to study this, he grew over 28,000 pea plants. But, I mean, why would he study peas? He could just study humans, right? Wrong. Why would he study peas? Well, peas are cheap. extremely cheap. They're easy to grow. They grow so quickly. And also their characteristics are easily identifiable. You look at the plant. Does it have yellow seeds or green seeds? Does it have purple flowers or white flowers? Are the peas wrinkled or are they smooth? Are the pea plants growing tall or are they being short? They're very easily identifiable. Way easier than if Gregor Mendel were to try and study giraffes or human babies, right? Because, for example, humans getting pregnant is a very long process. It takes 9 months. So if he were to try and study humans, 28,000 humans, that would take 28,000 times 365. No. There's a reason why I'm a science teacher, not a math teacher. I'm just going to move on. So basically, peas are very cheap, they're easy to grow, and they grow very, very, very quickly, so you can easily see the results of mating. So there are these things that are called true breeding plants. So by controlling fertilization between plants, Mendel was able to create some true breeding pea plants. What does true breeding mean? Well, I mean, think of the name, true breeding. That means that it's going to always breed for whatever it's true breeding for. So for example, if I say this plant is true breeding, well, not if I say, if a plant always produces purple offspring, then that plant is said to be true breeding for purple. Okay? But he then experimented to see what happened when he bred true plants that were true breeding for different traits. So for example, he took a true breeding purple plant, always produced purple offspring. Took a true breeding white plant, always produced a white offspring. He mated those together and was like, what's going to happen? Well, he found out that they produce purple offspring. All of them. All the offspring were purple. So, if one plant was true breeding for purple, and the other parent was true breeding for white, and all of the offspring have purple flowers, what happened here? Well, the only explanation for that is that purple, when it came down to it, it was purple versus white. The purple won, okay? And the way that we say that the purple won is that we say the purple trait was dominant over the white trait. So at this point in your notes, you should have filled out 1 through 6. Okay, you should have filled out 1 through 6 on your notes. Next section, vocabulary. Buckle up because we are learning words today. So new vocabulary alert. So some of this vocabulary we've already known. I just want to make sure that I clarify what this means. So a trait, we all know this, is a characteristic of some sort. So brown hair, short, wrinkled, whatever. Heredity is going to be passing genes from parent to offspring, inheriting something. Genes are located at a specific place along a chromosome. So we could say the pin cap, let's say this is a chromosome. The area represented by the pin cap, the blue part, could be the part that codes for wing shape. While down here, this part of the chromosome may code for stripes. I don't know, I'm just making it up. That's a gene. A gene is a specific place on a chromosome that codes for a specific thing. Well, that gene is going to have different forms, right? There's different forms. So for example, let's say this part of the chromosome codes for leg length. One part or one allele of that is a short leg, while the other allele of that is a tall leg. And allele is just a various form of the same gene. So let me break it down to you, because I realize this is a little bit confusing for me in high school, and I'm sure it's confusing to you now. So let me break it down. So this is what your chromosomes might look like. And this is what's called a karyotype. It's just where they take the chromosomes, they stain them, and they make a pretty picture from them. You see all of your chromosomes that are present in all of your cells. You'll notice that the green are represented as chromosomes that come from your father, and the purple is the chromosomes that come from your mother. Notice that you have 46 chromosomes. Each of them has 2 copies. So for example, this chromosome this set of chromosomes, we could say will code for dance moves and the length of your foot. I'm making up stuff, obviously, just for demonstration purposes. While this one right here may code for your hair texture and your eyelash length. You know, each set of chromosomes codes for something different. So just for demonstration purposes, let's look at one pair of chromosomes. We're going to I chose chromosome pair 15. Let's pretend the genes for hair color and hair texture are found here. From the father, which is this green chromosome, this organism inherited brown hair and a straight texture. From the mother, this organism inherited blonde hair with a wavy texture. So notice that the gene, which is the place on the chromosome, the genes here are going to be hair color and hair texture. The alleles is that one of them is brown hair and one of them is blonde hair. The other alleles is that one of them has straight hair and one has wavy hair. Okay, so again, the gene is going to be the place on that chromosome, while the allele are the different forms of that gene. So the gene hair color can come in different forms. Blonde hair, brown hair, or black hair gene, red hair gene. Okay, so if it doesn't make sense, we're going to practice with it. So how do we know which traits will be shown? Will the organism have brown hair? Or will the organism have blonde hair? Will the organism have straight texture or have a wavy texture? How do we know? They have copies of both. How do we know which one's actually going to be shown? Well, there's this thing called dominant alleles and recessive alleles. Dominant alleles are going to be the stronger ones. They are dominant. If they are present, they're going to show that they are there. While recessive alleles are going to be the weaker alleles. They're going to be represented using a lowercase letter. They're only going to show up if there's two recessive. Versus dominant. If dominant is there, you're going to know dominant is there because it is the strong allele, and if it's present at all, it's going to show that it's present. So again, alleles. For every gene, for example, hair color, you can have two of the same allele, or you can have two different alleles. So one can be recessive, dominant, both can be dominant, dominant, or both can be recessive, recessive. So a recessive allele will only produce a phenotype, so it will only be shown if there is no dominant allele present. Okay? Don't worry. Let's practice with it. Identify these alleles as dominant or recessive. So for K, would you say that's dominant or recessive? Well, it's a capital letter, so it's going to be dominant. How about R? Recessive, it's a lowercase letter. P, recessive, lowercase letter, exactly, and so forth. Here's to check your answers. So all capital letters are going to be representing a dominant allele, while the lowercase letters are going to represent recessive alleles. Okay, but remember that each chromosome has two copies, one from mom, one from dad. So you're going to have two letters, one from mom, one from dad. So will this organism show the dominant trait or the recessive trait? Well, we have dominant and dominant, so it's going to show the dominant trait. How about here? From the mom, we got big H. From the dad, we got little h. Will this organism show the dominant trait or the recessive trait? Well, anytime there's a dominant present, dominant is going to be shown. How about here? From mom, we got little h. From dad, we got little h. Recessive. The recessive allele will be shown, or the recessive trait will be shown. So here's an example of that. So if the dad has brown eyes, and brown eyes are dominant over blue eyes, then the child is going to end up with brown eyes. The blue trait is just hidden. Okay, so more new vocabulary. So we have genotype and phenotype. So it's pretty easy to remember this. I mean, genotype, the type of gene. So what are the genes? What are the alleles? Versus phenotype, physical characteristics, what you actually can see. This is not just determined by genotype. It can also be determined by the environment as well. Okay, so one thing to know is that genotype is going to code for the phenotype. However, the environment does have an effect. So that's why I said, like, genes, DNA is a very complicated topic, because like DNA can say one thing, but if the environmental conditions are not right, then it's not going to happen. So for example, flamingos. All flamingos have a genotype that makes them this pale pink pigment, a pale pink color on their body. However, environmental conditions such as eating lots of fish is going to give them a brighter pink color. It's going to make that pink gene more active. Okay, so that's why we say, like, the environment does have an effect on genes. So that's also why, for example, like, you may inherit a gene that codes for something such as anxiety or depression, but that doesn't mean that you're always going to automatically be anxious or depressed. That just means that you may be predisposed to certain things, but depending on your environmental conditions, you may not even see that trait. Okay. So identify these alleles as genotype or phenotype. So number one, AA. Would that be a genotype or would that be a phenotype? That's going to be a genotype. Brown eyes, would that be a genotype or a phenotype? Well, this is a physical characteristic that you can actually see, so that is going to be a phenotype, a physical characteristic. How about TT? Genotype. Red hair, phenotype. So again, genotype is the type of gene. So what'd you get from mom? What'd you get from dad? While the phenotype is the actual characteristics that is seen. More vocabulary. Like I said, this is so much vocabulary. So we have homozygous and heterozygous. So homo means same. So big R, or little r. Homozygous means same. Heterozygous, if there's hetero, that means that they're different. So big R, little r. That's all it is. Homozygous, so if you see this word homozygous, just look at the part that says homo. Homo means same. Hetero means different. So this is what this might look like. So again, we have our chromosomes. We have our gene. Remember, gene is just a place on the chromosome. Now, if these are both coding for pink, then they're homozygous. If these are coding for different things, then they're heterozygous. Remember, this is from mom. This is from dad. So mom and dad differ at this gene locus, then you're heterozygous for that specific trait. Mom and dad's chromosomes have the same. For this gene locus, you are homozygous. So homo means same, hetero means different. Identify these alleles as homozygous or heterozygous. HH, big H, same, homozygous. Big J, little j, different, heterozygous. Little p, homozygous. Okay, so remember, homozygous means that they are the exact same. So either they're both big or they're both little. Heterozygous means one big, one little. So this is a recap of the vocab. So it's all in one place. Let's just like try and organize it fully in our heads. So dominant allele is a stronger allele that will always show up, represented by a capital letter. Recessive allele is the weaker allele that will only show up if they are both small, if they're both recessive. Phenotype is the physical trait, for example, black hair. Genotype is the actual alleles that are located on the different chromosomes, so one from mom and one from dad. Homozygous means they have the same allele, so both homozygous recessive, right? Homozygous, same, recessive. They're both recessive. Or homozygous dominant, right? Homozygous means that they're both the same, and then they're both dominant, so they're homozygous dominant. Versus heterozygous means that the alleles are different. So got a big A from mom and a little a from dad. Okay, let's look at the laws of Mendelian genetics. So we have what is called the law of segregation. That just means that the two alleles for each gene are placed in different gametes. We have the law of dominance. When two alleles are present, only one is dominant and will be expressed. Right, so if there's a big H, it's going to dominate, it's going to be expressed. Okay, then we have law of independent assortment, which is the inheritance of one gene does not affect the inheritance of any other gene. So at this point, you should have been able to fill in all of these blanks and do all of these practice problems. Let's keep it moving. Almost done, almost done. We're almost getting to the actual Punnett squares. So real life. Unsurprisingly, genetics is the definition of in real life. So earlobes. So look at your ear. Touch them. Do they attach to your skull or are they kind of hanging off? That's evidence of dominant and recessive genetics at work. So the gene is for earlobe shape. The allele is big A means that the allele is attached. Little a means that the allele means that the earlobe is unattached. Which allele is dominant and which is recessive? How do you know? Well, the dominant allele, A, big A, sorry, I spaced out for a second. Big A is the dominant allele. I know that because it has a capital letter. I know that little a is recessive because it has the lowercase letter. What are all the different possible genotypes? Well, we have two alleles, one from mom, one from dad. So we could have big A, we could have big A, or we could have little a, little a. Those are the only combinations that we can do. All the different genotypes. What are their phenotypes? Well, big A has a dominant, and we know that dominant is going to say attached. Big A, little a has a dominant, and we know that dominant is going to say attached. Little a has only a recessive, which means that the earlobes are going to be unattached. Okay, so at this point, you should have been able to fill out these parts of your notes. All right, now we're to the actual part of the lesson, all that set up. Punnett squares. So we'll keep it simple for now. But just so you know, next lesson, we're going to do some complex Punnett squares. Just saying. Okay, so the infamous Punnett square is used to predict the outcomes of genetic crosses between two parents. This is what I was talking about with the whole TikTok, YouTube thing. People are like, I don't understand how this baby came out looking like this. Well, this is how. It's probability. So this is a Punnett square. I think you guys have already seen these in 8th grade, but in case you haven't, we're still going to start from the beginning. So there are these different parts of it. So over here and over here, these are where you place the parental genotypes. Okay? One thing to note, which students were confused about this, it doesn't mean that the mom has to go here and the dad has to go here. It doesn't matter where you place them. It could be mom here, dad here, it could be dad here, mom here. It doesn't matter. As long as these are the parental genotypes. You know, the genotypes are going to be the letters, the alleles. Okay? But in the middle, these are the possible genotypes for their children. So you're going to start off with mom and dad, and then you're going to fill in the possible genotypes. So let's look at this. We're going to do an example together. So stick with me. So there's this trait known as hair color. I'm just making this up. Brown is going to be dominant over red. Let's say that we have these two parents. We have mom, who is BB, and we have dad, or we have, what do I want to say? We have mom, who is big B, little b, and we have dad that is big B, little b. So they're both heterozygous, right? Because they have big B, little b. So the first question is, what hair color do each of the parents have? What hair color is mom? What hair color is dad? Well, they both have a dominant, and we know that brown is dominant, so they both have brown hair. What must the genotype be in order to have red hair? Well, brown is dominant over red, so red is recessive, so that means the genotype for red hair is going to be both recessive. BB. Little b, little b. Next question. What are their chances of having a child with red hair? Well, I don't know. That's what the Punnett Square is for. Okay? Recognize that each box, there are 4 boxes. This is 25%, 25%, 25%, and 25%. So that's how we're going to find out what are their chances, what is the probability. So we're going to put our parental genotypes first. Right? Mom, big B, little b. Dad, big B, little b. Is everyone clear on that? Good. Good. You're clear on that. Now we're going to fill in these boxes. So how do we fill them in? Well, we have B, big B, big B. What's going to go in here? What's going to go in this box? Big B and big B. Okay, next box. What's going to go in this box? Well, little b and big B. We always write the big one first just because it looks good that way. Okay, what about this box right here? Well, big B, little b. And last but not least, what goes in this box right here? Little b, little b. Okay, so now we found all of the possible genotypes for their offspring. Now, we're still looking for what are the odds of having a child with red hair. Well, we have to make sure that we understand what these genotypes actually code for. So, what hair color would be big B, big B? Brown is dominant over red. We have a dominant, so brown hair. How about these next ones? There's a dominant, so brown hair, and of course, red hair there. So what are their chances of having a child with red hair? So we have 4 options. One of the 4 is going to have red hair. 1 out of 4, which 25%. Okay. Chances of having a child with brown hair is 1, 2, 3. 3 out of the 4 are going to have brown hair. Now, one thing the students get confused on is this doesn't mean that the first kid is going to have brown hair, the second kid is going to have brown hair, the third kid is going to have brown hair, and then the fourth one is going to have red hair. This is the probability for each child. So as they are getting pregnant with one baby, there's a 1 in 4 chance. The next time they try and get pregnant again, there's still a 1 in 4 chance. Okay? So the probability is always 1 in 4 chance of having red hair. No matter how many kids, they could have had 12 kids that all had brown hair. Doesn't matter. On their 13th kid, as they're trying for their 13th kid, that 13th kid still has a 1 in 4 chance of having red hair. Each fertilization event is separate. Okay. So at this point, you should have filled out your notes up until this point. Now we are going to do a couple of quick practice problems that are not necessarily on your notes, but are going to help you because you're going to have, there's a worksheet attached to the end of the notes. So let's go through these practice problems really quick. So a plant with white flowers was crossed with a plant with red flowers. All the offspring has white flowers. Which of these describes the red flower trait? So a plant with white flowers all the offspring have white flowers. So which of these describes the red flower trait? So the red flower trait must be, I typed that wrong. All the offspring, if they end up with white flowers, then the red flower is recessive. Ignore that. No, I typed that wrong. Okay, this Punnett square shows a cross between two flowering plants. One parent has purple flowers, and the other parent has white flowers. Which of these describes the offspring that are expected from this cross? So look at the offspring. Which of these ratios matches? So how would we know that A is the right answer? Well, we know A is the right answer because the parent with white flowers is recessive homozygous, and the parent with purple flowers is heterozygous, which tells us that purple is dominant. Anytime there was a big P, it was purple. If there's both little p's, they make white. So that tells us that these are white flowered offspring and these are purple flowered offspring. Okay, so that's how these problems can get a little bit confusing, is because they may not tell you. You have to read the problem and interpret what genotypes match what phenotypes. Okay, let's solve this. So cystic fibrosis is a hereditary disease that affects the respiratory and digestive systems. Cystic fibrosis occurs when two recessive genes are present. A person with one allele for cystic fibrosis is called a carrier of the disease. Actually, we're going to go ahead and stop here, and we'll end up doing these problems later. I want you to go ahead and move on to your to do these practice problems, and of course your exit ticket. And